VelariPrime was a jewel of the inner trade routes. From orbit, the planet shimmered with oceans of silver blue and land masses covered by shining cities of crystal towers. It was a place known for peace, learning, and prosperity. For centuries, the Velari people had believed that war was a thing of the past. Their minds were devoted to science, engineering, medicine, and art. Conflict was left to the history books, but now the shadow of war had returned, and the Velari were unprepared. The Galactic Dominion, a warlike empire from the far edge of the spiral arm, had come with fleets of steel-black warships. The Dominion ships were designed for one purpose: conquest. They swept across star systems like fire over dry grass, and no civilization had managed to resist them for long. The Galactic valued only strength. They had no patience for diplomacy. VelariPrime's orbital defense grid had lasted only a week. The satellites and automated turrets that once guarded the skies fell in flames. The first wave of Galactic cruisers broke the Velari fleet like fragile glass. The survivors retreated into the atmosphere where the cities still held protective shields. Now every day brought more despair. In the capital city of Selinar Spire, the High Council gathered. 12 members sat around a circular table of polished stone, each dressed in robes that shimmered like woven starlight. Their faces showed fear that they struggled to hide. "We cannot hold them off any longer," Counselor Saren admitted, her voice heavy. "Our shields weaken with every bombardment. If the Dominion presses harder, our cities will fall within weeks." Counselor Thalen raised his hands in protest. "We must negotiate. The Galactic must have terms. Perhaps they want tribute. We could—" "No," interrupted Elder Ryle, the oldest of the council. His voice was rough, though steady. "You do not bargain with predators. The Galactic do not want tribute. They want dominion. They want chains around our people's necks." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. The Galactic had enslaved or destroyed every world they touched. The Velari would be no exception. At last, the council leader, High Chancellor Vera, spoke. Her eyes a deep violet swept the room. "Then we must do what we have not done in 1,000 years. We must call for help." A murmur of disbelief spread across the chamber. "From whom?" asked Thalen bitterly. "The Zelvari Pact is far. The Kaloran Confederacy owes us no loyalty, and the Republic of Valoran is already fighting for its own survival against the Dominion. We will send the signal to all who can hear it," Vera said firmly. "Any ally, any neighbor, any power who can answer? We have always given knowledge freely to the galaxy. Now let us see if the galaxy will give back." With those words, the decision was made. That night, engineers gathered at the great beacon station on Selinar Spire. The tower rose higher than any other building, piercing the clouds with a crystalline spire that glowed faintly blue. At its heart was the Galactic Relay Beacon, an ancient piece of technology gifted by an old alliance long faded. When activated, it could send a message across thousands of light years in a burst of energy that no receiver could ignore. The message was simple. To any who can hear this, we are the people of VelariPrime. We are under attack by the Galactic Dominion. Our defenses falter. Our lives are at risk. We ask for aid, for reinforcements, for anyone who will stand against this darkness. Please help us. The words echoed into the void. The beacon flashed, then dimmed, its message hurled into the galaxy. The Velari waited. Days passed. The bombardment above the cities continued. The Galactic cruisers circled like vultures, firing testing shots against the shields. Refugees poured into the capital from the countryside. Food grew scarce. Fear spread like sickness. In the council chambers, doubt grew as well. "Perhaps no one heard us," Thalen said on the 4th day. "Or perhaps they heard and turned away," Saren whispered. Chancellor Vera remained silent. She looked up at the stars every night, wondering if any civilization would risk angering the Dominion to help them. On the 7th day, the sky above VelariPrime split with light. The people of Selinar Spire rushed to the streets as streaks of fire crossed the night sky. A fleet was emerging from faster-than-light travel, just beyond the orbit of the shattered defense grid. The council ordered all observation platforms to focus. A voice crackled through the comm channels, rough and sharp compared to the melodious tones of Velari speech. "This is Captain Elias Ward of the United Terran Fleet. We received your distress call. Reinforcements have arrived." The council listened in stunned silence. "Terran?" Saren whispered. "Humans?" Few among the Velari had ever met a human. The species was young by galactic standards, having spread into the stars only a few centuries earlier. They came from a single dangerous planet catalogued as a Class 5 Deathworld, a world filled with storms, predators, diseases, and constant natural disasters. Most species avoided such planets, but humanity had not only survived their world, they had thrived. In galactic records, they were spoken of with a mix of awe and suspicion. Some called them brave explorers. Others called them reckless warmakers. To most, they were simply Deathworlders, a name that carried both fear and respect. And now, these were the ones who had come to VelariPrime. The Velari expected sleek, polished warships like those of the Coloran. Instead, what appeared above their skies were rugged vessels built for survival. The largest was the UTS Resolute, a heavy cruiser patched with armor plates of mismatched metals, its surface scorched with old battle scars. Smaller frigates and corvettes flanked it, each bristling with missile pods, railguns, and weapons that looked crude compared to Velari energy cannons, but carried a brutal efficiency. The Velari counselors exchanged uneasy glances. "These are not reinforcements," Thalen muttered. "These are raiders." "They came when no one else did," Chancellor Vera reminded him, though doubt flickered in her eyes as well. Moments later, the human fleet contacted them again. "VelariPrime, we acknowledge your distress call. We are here to assist. Give us tactical data on enemy positions and we'll get to work." In the command chamber, the counselors argued. "They cannot face the Dominion fleet," Saren exclaimed. "They will be destroyed, and then the Graltak will turn on us again." "They are humans," Riel said slowly. "I have read about them. They are not like other species," Counselor Thalen scoffed. "Savages from a dangerous planet. What could they possibly do that our shields and weapons cannot?" "Survive," Riel answered simply. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Elias Ward studied the battlefield. He was a tall man with a weathered face, his uniform plain but practical. He had fought in dozens of skirmishes across the frontier, and his crew was no less seasoned. They were not many, only 7 ships in total, but each carried warriors hardened by endless struggle. Ward saw the Graltak cruisers circling like predators. He saw the failing Velari defenses below, and he felt a familiar fire rise in his chest. "They asked for help," he said to his officers. "Well, they're getting us. Let's show the Dominion what Deathworlders do when someone cries for aid." His crew grinned, some with nervous excitement, others with grim determination. For them, this was not the first impossible fight. It would not be the last. Down on VelariPrime, the people gazed upward at the strange ships of humankind. Hope flickered in their hearts, mixed with fear. Would these rough, scarred strangers truly stand against the Graltak? Could anyone stop the darkness that had already crushed so many worlds? The answer would come soon, because even as the human fleet aligned itself in orbit, the Graltak warships began to move. Their dark hulls glimmered with the fire of charging weapons. The Dominion had seen the newcomers, and they were not amused. The first clash was about to begin. The sky above VelariPrime glowed with fire as the Graltak fleet shifted formation. Their dark angular ships spread out like predators circling prey. The Dominion was not used to being challenged. For centuries, their enemies had always broken under fear. But this time, a small and unexpected fleet had arrived. Human ships. From the balconies of Selenar Spire, the Velari citizens watched with wide eyes. The sight of 7 battered vessels hanging in orbit did not inspire confidence. Compared to the vast Dominion fleet of 20 warships, the Terran ships looked fragile, even weak. But the humans did not retreat. Inside the council chamber, tension filled the air. "Do they not understand?" Counselor Thalen asked sharply. "They will be crushed. Their weapons are primitive, their ships are few. They cannot win." "They chose to come," Elder Ryle said calmly, though his wrinkled hands trembled. "We should at least see what they intend." High Chancellor Vera leaned forward. Her violet eyes locked on the display screen where the human fleet's formation was shown. "Open a channel," she ordered. A moment later, the screen flickered to reveal Captain Elias Ward. His uniform was plain gray with no bright ornaments. His face was weathered, with eyes that seemed carved from stone. Behind him, his bridge crew moved quickly, preparing weapons. "This is Chancellor Vera of VelariPrime," she said formally. "You have answered our call. For that we are grateful, but the Graltak fleet before you is vast. You cannot face them alone." Ward gave a small, dry smile. "We're not here to face them alone. We're here to fight with you. Send us targeting data, shield frequencies, and terrain maps. We'll handle the rest." His voice carried no doubt, no hesitation. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. To the Volari, war was chaos and fear. To these humans, it seemed almost routine. On the bridge of the UTS Resolute, Captain Ward studied the tactical display. Red markers showed the Galactic cruisers moving into attack position. The Dominion was confident, perhaps too confident. That arrogance would cost them. "Status?" Ward asked. "Railguns charged. Missile racks loaded. Point defense online," replied Commander Hale, his second-in-command. Ward nodded. "Good, let's introduce ourselves." He opened the fleet-wide channel. "Terran Fleet, you know the drill. These Dominion bastards think they can scare us with numbers. They've never fought Deathworlders. We don't break. We don't run. We hit them until they regret ever stepping into this system. Stay sharp, stay brutal." The human crews cheered over the comms. The battle began. The Galactic flagship fired first, a lance of green plasma that shot across the void. It struck the Resolute's shields with a flash, shaking the cruiser but leaving it standing. The humans answered immediately. Railguns thundered, launching hypervelocity slugs the size of small cars. The slugs slammed into the nearest Galactic destroyer, punching holes straight through its armor. Sparks and debris exploded from its hull. Then the human missile pods lit up. Dozens of warheads streaked toward the enemy fleet. The Galactic scrambled to intercept, but the missiles split mid-flight, releasing swarms of smaller guided warheads. Some were decoys, others carried high-yield charges. A storm of explosions rocked the enemy formation. From the streets of Selenar Spire, the Volari citizens gasped. They had never seen such crude but devastating firepower. Human weapons did not look elegant. They did not shine with graceful energy beams. They struck like hammers. They destroyed with brutal efficiency. Inside the council chamber, disbelief filled the air. "They are not following any battle doctrine," Saren said, eyes wide. "They move as if chaos is their plan. They adapt," Elder Ryle corrected softly. "Every shot, every strike, they adjust. They do not fight with rules. They fight to win." Thalen shook his head. "This cannot last. The Dominion has greater numbers. They will crush them." But even as he spoke, another Galactic ship exploded, torn apart by a human boarding team. The Volari leaned closer to the screen in shock. The humans had launched small assault craft straight into the hull of an enemy cruiser. Instead of keeping distance, they closed in, drilling through the armor and unleashing soldiers in armored suits. The Volari watched in awe as the human marines fought in the void of space, their movements swift and brutal. The Galactic defenders were larger, with heavy claws and scales, but the humans moved with terrifying determination. "Madness," Thalen whispered. "They are fighting hand-to-hand in the dark." "Survivors," Ryle murmured. "This is what it means to come from a death world." On the Resolute's bridge, Captain Ward received the boarding reports. "Enemy cruiser neutralized," came the voice of Sergeant Vega over comms. "Lost 6 men, but the rest secured the core. Setting charges now." "Good work," Ward replied. "Get your people out. Make them bleed." Seconds later, the Volari saw a Galactic cruiser erupt into a fireball as the humans detonated charges from within. The Dominion fleet shifted uneasily. They had not expected this level of ferocity. Still, the fight was not one-sided. A Galactic heavy destroyer locked onto one of the smaller human frigates, the UTS Falcon. Plasma fire rained down. The Falcon's shields collapsed under the barrage. The frigate broke apart in a spray of molten debris. On the Volari streets, cries of despair rose. The people had already begun to hope, and now they feared that hope would die. But Ward's voice came across the Volari channel, steady and unshaken. "We lost 1 ship. The crew knew the risk. We keep fighting. Every drop of blood we spill today buys freedom tomorrow. Do not lose heart." To the Volari, the words seemed hard, even cold, but they carried a fire, a certainty the Volari had never known in their leaders. Hours passed as the battle raged. The humans fought like wolves against lions, smaller and fewer but relentless. Each time the Galactic tried a new formation, the humans shifted tactics. They used asteroids as cover, dragging enemy ships into ambushes. They overloaded their own reactors to fire weapons beyond safe limits. The Dominion was bleeding. 4 of their ships lay in ruins, others damaged. But the humans had lost 2 more vessels, and their fleet was now only 4 strong. From the council chamber, Chancellor Vera felt torn between fear and awe. She turned to her fellow counselors. They fight with everything, she said. Not just weapons, but will. I see it now. This is why the galaxy calls them Deathworlders, where we would surrender. They rise. When the Graltak finally retreated to regroup, a strange silence fell across Valari Prime. The battle was not a victory. The Dominion still had the upper hand. But for the first time, Valari Prime had survived a full assault. The human fleet remained in orbit, battered but unbroken. Fire still burned inside the Resolute. Emergency teams worked endlessly to keep the surviving ships operational. On the streets below, Valari citizens looked to the sky not with despair, but with new hope. Later that night, the Council held another meeting. Captain Ward joined them via HoloLink. You saved us, Chancellor Vera said sincerely. No one else came. Only you. Ward's expression was calm, but his voice carried steel. We didn't come for thanks. We came because the Dominion must be stopped. They'll be back with more ships. If you want to survive, you need to learn how to fight, Saren frowned. We are not warriors. We are builders, healers, thinkers. Ward's gaze hardened. Then start building weapons. Start healing soldiers. Start thinking like survivors. Because the Graltak won't give you mercy. They'll take your world unless you stand beside us. His words fell like hammers on the counselors' hearts. The Valari had always believed knowledge alone was enough. But these humans showed them a different truth. Survival required strength. That night, as Valari citizens gathered in the city plazas, they looked up at the human ships shining faintly above the clouds. They whispered the name given to humans long ago, Deathworlders. But now the word no longer carried only fear. For the first time, it carried hope. The Valari had asked for reinforcements. What they received were humans scarred and relentless. And though the outcome of the war remained uncertain, one truth was already clear. The Dominion had finally met a foe unlike any they had faced before. The Deathworlders had arrived. The battle above Valari Prime ended with no true winner. The Graltak Dominion pulled back, but not out of fear. They retreated only to prepare a stronger assault. Their fleet still outnumbered the humans, and their weapons were powerful. Yet something had changed. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion had been forced to step back. And the galaxy's most peaceful people had seen that survival was possible. Not through negotiation, not through surrender, but through resistance. Down in Selenar Spire, the Valari High Council debated through the night. The voices of fear clashed with the voices of hope. They will return with more ships, Councillor Thalen warned. They will burn our cities to ash. We cannot endure another attack. Perhaps so, Elder Ryle replied, his voice calm. But the humans showed us that endurance is not enough. We must learn to fight, Saren shook her head. Fight with what? We have no armies. Our fleets are gone. They still have us, Chancellor Vera said firmly. Her gaze turned to the display where the battered human cruiser, the UTS Resolute, drifted in orbit like a scarred guardian. And they will not fight alone. Not anymore. On the human flagship, Captain Elias Ward reviewed damage reports. His fleet was down to 4 ships, 2 cruisers and 2 smaller frigates. Shields were weak, ammunition was low, and casualties were heavy. But morale remained unbroken. Ward knew why. His people had been shaped by a world that punished weakness every day. They carried that same fire into space. Now his task was clear. Teach the Valari to carry it too. The first joint council between humans and Valari was held the next morning. It was an unusual sight. Human officers in rugged uniforms stood beside Valari scholars dressed in flowing robes. One side scarred from battles, the other untouched by war. Captain Ward wasted no time. The Dominion will strike again, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. We won't survive by waiting. We need to hit them first. The Valari counselors exchanged nervous glances. Strike them? Saren repeated, shocked. But their fleet is larger. Their weapons are stronger. Ward's eyes narrowed. And that's exactly why we can't let them choose the fight. We don't win by being stronger. We win by being smarter, by making them bleed in ways they don't expect. He tapped a holographic display. Enemy ships lit up in red while asteroid fields and orbital debris flashed in blue. They think they control the skies, Ward continued, but we can use the battlefield itself. Asteroids, debris, gravity wells, these are weapons too. We'll make them fight on our terms. The Valari engineers leaned forward, fascinated. They were builders at heart, and the idea of turning natural forces into weapons sparked their curiosity. You would move asteroids? asked one scientist. Why not? Ward replied. Your gravity tractors are good for mining. Strap engines to rocks and you've got guided weapons the size of buildings. The Dominion won't see it coming, Saren whispered in disbelief. This is madness. Elder Ryle's eyes glimmered. No, this is survival. In the days that followed, SCIFI-Prime became something it had not been for millennia, a world preparing for war. Human officers trained Valari volunteers in simple combat drills. The Valari were not used to holding weapons, but under human guidance they learned discipline and courage. Keep your stance firm, Sergeant Vega instructed as he walked among rows of Valari recruits. The weapon isn't just metal. It's your will. If you hesitate, you die. If you strike with purpose, you live. The Valari listened. They were quick learners, though unused to such harsh lessons. Meanwhile, Valari engineers worked alongside human technicians to turn peaceful machines into instruments of war. Mining lasers were converted into ship-mounted cannons. Civilian shuttles were reinforced with armor plating. Asteroids were fitted with thrusters ready to be launched as kinetic weapons. What once had been a world of scholars and artists was slowly becoming a fortress. The Dominion, of course, noticed the changes. Their scouts reported unusual activity around SCIFI-Prime. The Galactic fleet commander, Lord Jakor, snarled with amusement when he heard. Let them prepare, Jakor growled. They are children playing at war. When we return, we will show them what true conquest looks like. His fleet grew larger each day, reinforcements pouring in from nearby systems. The Dominion believed victory was already assured. But humans knew something the Galactic did not. Arrogance was a weakness. The counterattack came 2 weeks later. The Galactic fleet advanced on Valari. Prime once more, black warships cutting across the void. The Valari civilians trembled in their cities, watching the skies burn. But this time they did not hide in silence. This time they watched with hope. The humans were ready. From the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Ward issued his orders. Launch the rocks. Deep in the asteroid belt near SCIFI-Prime, hidden thrusters ignited. Massive stones, each the size of a small tower, began to move. Guided by Valari tractor beams, the asteroids accelerated toward the Dominion fleet. At first, the Galactic laughed. Their shields could stop any weapon. But when the first asteroid struck, the laughter died. The sheer kinetic force tore through a destroyer's shield and crumpled its hull like paper. A second impact smashed into another ship, sending it spinning out of control. Then the missiles came. Human warheads launched from behind the drifting rocks. The Galactic scrambled to respond, their formations breaking. The humans had turned the battlefield into a trap. Watching from Selinar's spire, Chancellor Vera clenched her hands as the holographic display showed explosions across the void. They're doing it, she whispered. They're truly doing it. Counselor Thalen, once so doubtful, stared in awe. This is not war as we know it. This is something else entirely. Yes, Riel said softly. This is the way of Deathworlders. The battle grew fierce. Human boarding parties struck again, drilling into enemy ships and fighting in brutal close quarters. Valari-trained crews provided support, guiding tractor beams and disabling enemy shields. For the first time, Valari fighters, small shuttles hastily converted into gunships, joined the fray. Their weapons were weak compared to human cannons, but their courage was strong. With humans beside them, they found bravery they had never known. The turning point came when the humans targeted the Dominion flagship. Bring us in close, Ward ordered. Commander Hale looked at him in shock. That ship's 3 times our size. Its cannons will tear us apart. Ward's eyes were cold fire. Then we don't give it the chance. The Resolute charged forward, weaving through enemy fire. Valari tractor beams pulled more asteroids into the path of the flagship, forcing it to slow. Human missiles rained down, stripping away its shields. Finally, the Resolute closed the gap. Boarding craft launched like arrows, slamming into the flagship's hull. Dozens of human marines stormed inside. The fighting was savage, but the humans never hesitated. Room by room, they carved their way to the flagship's core. On SCIFI-Prime, citizens gathered in plazas, staring at the sky as if their will alone could push the humans forward. For the first time, they prayed not for peace, but for victory. Hours later, the Dominion flagship erupted into a ball of fire. The explosion lit the heavens above SCIFI-Prime. A roar of triumph shook the cities. Valari voices cried out in celebration. For the first time, they had seen their enemy bleed. The Dominion fleet, stunned and leaderless, pulled back once more. They had lost too many ships. Valari Prime still stood. Back in the council chamber, Captain Ward appeared once more via hololink. His uniform was scorched, his face marked with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with the same relentless fire. "You see now," he told the council, "the Dominion can be beaten. But this is only the beginning. They'll return and they'll bring everything they have. If you want to survive, you must be ready to fight beside us." Chancellor Vera stood, her voice steady. "We will. No longer will Valari Prime be only a world of peace. We will be a world of survivors." The councillors nodded, even Thalen. Fear had not vanished, but it no longer ruled them. That night, as the fires of the destroyed Dominion flagship burned in the sky, the Valari people celebrated. Music filled the plazas, lights shone from every tower. For the first time, they felt not only relief, but pride. They had asked for reinforcements. What they had received were Deathworlders. And with them, they had struck back. The war was far from over, but hope had finally returned to Valari Prime. Valari Prime had been holding on for weeks, but now the sky above the capital city burned with fire. Enemy warships filled the orbit, and the night was no longer dark. It glowed red with the constant flash of energy blasts. The Galactic Dominion had returned stronger than before. They were furious. The first defeat at the hands of the humans had been a humiliation their empire could not tolerate. To them, it was not just a battle lost, it was their pride, their reputation across the galaxy. So they sent more fleets, bigger ships, and more soldiers. They wanted to drown Valari Prime in fire and prove that no one, not even the strange Deathworlders, could stand against them. Inside the Valari High Council chamber, panic was spreading. Members of the council argued in loud voices. "We must surrender," one elder shouted. "If we fight any longer, our cities will fall. Our people will be destroyed." Another countered, "Surrender means slavery. The Dominion will strip us of our culture, our knowledge, everything that makes us Valari. Better to fight," but their voices shook. The Valari were a peaceful race, and war was unnatural to them. They wanted survival, but they had no strength to achieve it on their own. In the middle of this storm of voices, Captain Elias Ward, the human commander, stood calm. His uniform was torn and scorched from earlier battles. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with fire. He listened to the panic and then he spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You don't survive a death world by running," he said firmly. "You survive by making the predator bleed until it gives up." The chamber fell silent. Every Valari eye turned toward him. Elias stepped forward, his boots echoing on the polished floor. "You called for reinforcements and we came. We're not here to surrender. We're not here to watch you fall. We're here to fight, and fight we will." "But the Galactic numbers are too great," a Valari councillor cried. "You have only a handful of ships left. Even with our defenses, how can we resist an entire fleet?" Elias looked at him steadily. "We don't resist. We fight smarter. We fight harder. And we fight together. That is how Deathworlders survive." Preparing for the last stand. The Valari were afraid, but something in the human's words reached them. His determination was like a spark in dry grass, and it began to spread. The Valari had always thought of humans as reckless and dangerous, but now they saw another side. Courage. Valari engineers and human soldiers began working side by side. The Valari shared their advanced shielding technology, and the humans offered brutal, practical designs for weapons. It was a strange mix, elegance and raw strength, but together it worked. In the great hangars of Valari Prime, the sound of industry thundered. Machines hummed, sparks flew, and new hybrid weapons were born. Valari plasma generators were mounted onto human cannons. Human armor plating was fused with Valari energy fields, creating shields that could hold longer under fire. For the first time, the Valari began to feel they could fight. Not just survive, but fight. One Valari engineer named Tyralin watched the humans closely. He saw how they moved, how they carried themselves. They were always alert, always prepared for danger, as if expecting the world to attack them at any moment. To Tyralin, it was strange but also inspiring. "You live as if death is always near," he said to one human soldier. The soldier, a woman named Corporal Reyes, gave a small grin. "That's life on Earth. Every day something tries to kill you, storms, beasts, the land itself. You learn to fight or you don't live long." Tyralin thought about that for a long time. Perhaps that was why the humans were different. They didn't just build things to last, they built themselves to last. The enemies advance in orbit. The Galactic fleet spread across the sky like a black storm. Their ships were massive, bristling with weapons. The Valari defense satellites fired desperately, but one by one they were destroyed. On the ground, the shields protecting the cities trembled under the endless bombardment. Energy barriers flickered and people crowded in shelters, terrified. Elias Ward gathered his officers in the command center. Holograms of the enemy fleet glowed in the air, showing the hopeless odds. "They'll break through in hours," one lieutenant said grimly. "Then we make those hours count," Elias replied. He pointed to the map. "Here, the Galactic rely on their command ship to coordinate. We hit it hard, and the rest of the fleet will stumble." "But sir," another officer argued, "that ship is guarded by an entire wing of destroyers. We can't reach it." Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we bleed our way through. One step at a time. Every ship we take down is another chance." The humans understood. This was the Deathworld way: fight, adapt, endure. But the Valari looked uncertain. They had never launched such a reckless attack. Elias turned to them. "You want to live? Then stop thinking about what you can't do, and start thinking about what you must do." Rising courage in the following hours, training centers filled with Valari volunteers. Inspired by the humans, many decided to join the defense. They learned quickly, their nimble minds adapting to weapons they once feared to touch. Valari soldiers stood beside human Marines, watching as they were shown how to fire rifles, how to move in squads, how to fight with determination. The humans did not sugarcoat the truth. They told them it would be hard, that many would fall, but that fighting gave them something surrender never could: hope. On the front lines, the humans and Valari began to bond. They shared food, stories, and laughter, even as the enemy drew closer. In those moments, they became more than allies, they became comrades. The Great Assault, when the Galactic descended in full force, the battle shook the planet. Their ships pierced the shields, landing waves of armored troops. Skies filled with fire as drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. Elias gave the order, and the humans struck first. Their warships, battered and fewer in number, hurled themselves at the enemy with reckless fury. Valari defense ships followed, their weapons now enhanced by human design. The battle in space was chaos. Human ships rammed Galactic cruisers, detonating reactors to tear open enemy hulls. Valari vessels unleashed precise bursts of plasma that sliced through enemy shields. Together, they fought not as separate forces but as one. On the ground, the fighting was fierce. Valari soldiers, once afraid of battle, now fought with courage. They had learned from the humans. Survival required willpower. They fought in streets, in tunnels, in burning cities, never surrendering an inch without a struggle. Humans led them in brutal tactics, ambushes, traps, close-quarter fights that shocked the Galactic. These aliens, who had conquered countless worlds, had never faced resistance like this. For every Valari or human they cut down, more rose to take their place. The human gamble. Despite their courage, the defenders were being pushed to the edge. The Galactic still had more ships, more soldiers, more firepower. Slowly, GalacticPrime was bleeding. Elias knew it. He could see it in the faces of his soldiers, in the exhaustion in their movements. They couldn't last much longer, so he chose a gamble only a Deathworlder would make. "We take their command ship," he told his officers. "Not later, now. If we don't, this world falls." The plan was madness. They would launch every ship left, human and Valari, in one final strike against the enemy flagship. Many would not return. But if they destroyed that ship, the Galactic fleet would break. The Valari Council hesitated, but their people were already fighting with human courage. At last, they gave their blessing. The breaking point. The final battle began with a storm of fire. Human and Valari ships hurled themselves into the enemy formation. Explosions lit the void as ships on both sides were torn apart. Elias's flagship led the charge, weaving through enemy fire, its cannons blazing. Valari escorts shielded it, their plasma bursts cutting paths through the destroyers. Closer and closer they pushed, until the massive silhouette of the Galactic command ship filled their view. It was a beast of steel, bristling with weapons, its presence like a shadow over the stars. Inside the Valari shelters, civilians held their breath, watching the battle unfold on screens. Hope and fear mixed in their hearts. On the ground, Valari soldiers fought harder than ever. They knew their lives, their future, depended on the humans reaching that ship. Elias stood on the bridge, his voice steady even as alarms screamed around him. "All ships, concentrate fire! We bring it down here or not at all!" And the defenders obeyed. Humans and Valari alike threw everything they had into that one desperate strike. The breaking point had come. The sky above GalacticPrime was fire and steel. The Galactic fleet, massive and unyielding, filled the heavens like a storm of death. The humans and Valari defenders hurled themselves into the chaos, ships burning, shields cracking, lives ending in bright flashes across the void. At the center of it all loomed the Galactic command ship, a giant fortress in space, its surface bristling with cannons and shields that glowed like molten suns. To the defenders it looked unstoppable, but Captain Elias Ward stood at the heart of his battered flagship, eyes locked on the enemy vessel with grim determination. "This ends here," he said quietly, as if speaking to himself, though the words carried across the bridge. "We break them or we all fall." The final push. The combined fleet surged forward. Human ships, scarred from endless battles, threw themselves recklessly into the fight. Valari vessels, sleek and precise, moved in tight formations, their plasma beams slicing through enemy screens. Together they carved a path of fire toward the command ship, but the Galactic would not yield easily. Their destroyers swarmed like predators, surrounding the defenders, tearing holes in their lines. One by one, Valari cruisers exploded, their fire extinguished in silence. "Shield failure on the left flank," shouted a Valari officer from the comms. "We hold the line," Elias barked. His voice cut through the fear. "Every second we fight is another second closer to victory." His crew nodded, pushing controls, shouting updates, fighting exhaustion. They were all running on courage now. Courage and stubborn willpower. Boarding the beast as the defenders approached the command ship, Elias made his boldest decision yet. "We're not just going to shoot it," he said. "We're going to board it." Gasps filled the bridge. Even the humans looked stunned. To board a ship of that size, filled with thousands of enemy soldiers, was madness. But Elias explained with sharp, clear words. "That ship is their brain. Their orders come from there. We kill it from the inside and the body dies with it." Human Marines nodded grimly. Valari soldiers hesitated, fear flashing in their wide eyes. Yet when they looked at the humans, scarred, relentless, ready, they felt something stir inside them. The same courage that had carried them through weeks of fighting. "We'll go with you," a Valari captain said at last. "We will not let you fight alone." Elias gave a rare smile. "Good. Let's make history." Into the fire drop shuttles launched from the fleet, racing through enemy fire. Galactic cannons tore holes in the black, but the humans had prepared tricks. They filled the void with decoys, scrambling signals, turning the approach into chaos. One by one, the shuttles slammed into the side of the command ship. Metal screeched. Hulls cracked. Explosives tore open breaches. And then, humans and Valari poured into the enemy's heart. The corridors of the Galactic vessel shook with violence. Human Marines, armored and brutal, charged with rifles blazing. Valari soldiers followed, moving with precision, covering corners, striking with plasma bursts. The Galactic roared in fury, meeting them with overwhelming numbers. The fighting was savage, close, and unrelenting. Energy bolts cut through the air. Blades clashed. Smoke filled the halls. The spirit of survival, Corporal Reyes, led a squad down a burning corridor, a Valari engineer named Tiralen at her side. They fought door by door, room by room. "Why do you keep pushing like this?" Tiralen asked between bursts of fire, his hands trembling on his rifle. Reyes grinned even as sweat dripped down her face. "Because quitting is death, and I'm not dead yet." Tiralen nodded slowly, feeling strength in her words. For the first time, he fought without hesitation, firing alongside her, his fear replaced by determination. Across the ship, similar scenes played out. Valari soldiers who once trembled in battle now stood shoulder to shoulder with humans, their courage burning bright. The spirit of the Deathworlders was no longer just human. It had become theirs too. The price of victory, but victory demanded sacrifice. Human squads were cut down as they advanced. Valari fighters fell beside them, their blood staining the alien steel. Still, they pushed forward. On the bridge of the command ship, the Galactic warlord roared his fury. He could not believe that these lesser beings had dared to set foot on his vessel. His pride burned hotter than his anger. "Crush them," he bellowed. "Show them the price of defiance." But the defenders kept coming. No matter how many they lost, more followed. They fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for survival, and survival gave them a strength the Graltak could not match. The final gambit at last, Elias and his strike team reached the central core of the command ship. Alarms screamed. Fires burned in every corner. Enemy soldiers poured in from all sides. "Hold them," Elias shouted. His rifle blazed as he fought side by side with Valari and human alike. Tiralan rushed to the control panel, his hands flying across alien circuits. "I can overload their core," he shouted. "But it will destroy the entire ship." "That's the idea," Elias said grimly. "Do it," the Valari engineer hesitated. "But you'll be trapped here." Elias's eyes were calm. "If this ship lives, your world dies. Make the choice." Tiralan's hands trembled, but then he pressed the command. The core began to glow, humming with rising energy. The ship itself seemed to scream. The last stand. The Graltak warlord himself entered the chamber, a towering figure in heavy armor. His voice boomed like thunder. "You dare defy me?" he roared. Elias raised his weapon. "We don't bow to tyrants," the warlord charged, and the chamber became chaos. Humans and Valari fought desperately, holding off waves of enemies while Elias faced the warlord in brutal combat. The clash was fierce. The warlord's strength was monstrous, his blows shaking the deck. But Elias was a Deathworlder, tough, relentless, and cunning. He fought with everything he had, every scar, every lesson of survival burned into his soul. At last, with a roar, Elias drove his blade through the warlord's chest. The alien staggered, disbelief in his eyes, before collapsing to the floor. Elias stood over him, breathing hard, as the core behind them grew brighter and brighter. Escape and sacrifice. "Captain," Reyes shouted. "We have to go!" Elias looked at the glowing core. "There's no time." But then Tiralan stepped forward. "There is if someone stays to hold the overload steady. If no one controls it, the detonation might fail." The chamber went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "I'll do it," Elias said finally. His voice was steady, though his crew cried out in protest. "You can't," Reyes began. "I can," Elias cut her off. "This is what we came for. Get out, live, tell the galaxy what happened here." For a moment no one moved. Then Reyes saluted, tears in her eyes. "Yes, sir." The humans and Valari retreated, dragging the wounded, racing for the shuttles. Elias stayed behind, hands on the controls, watching the core blaze brighter. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Let's see you bleed." Predator. The explosion heard across the stars. The shuttles blasted away from the command ship, racing into space. Behind them, the massive vessel trembled, glowing like a sun, and then it exploded. The shockwave tore across the battlefield, ripping through the Graltak fleet. Without their command ship, the enemy formation shattered. Confusion spread. Some ships fled. Others were destroyed in the chaos. The defenders, humans and Valari alike, watched in awe as the impossible happened. The mighty Graltak were retreating. Valari. Prime was saved. The aftermath in the days that followed. The people of Valari mourned their dead and rebuilt their cities, but their spirits had changed forever. They had been scholars, thinkers, and dreamers. Now they were also warriors. Not because they loved war, but because they had learned the truth from the humans. Survival was not given, it was fought for. The Valari High Council held a ceremony in the capital. They honored the fallen, both Valari and human, and they spoke of Captain Elias Ward, the Deathworlder who had given everything to save them. "His name will not be forgotten," the council declared. "His courage is now part of us. His spirit lives in Valari Prime." The legacy, the galaxy whispered of the battle. News spread far and wide. For the first time, the Graltak Dominion had been defeated. Not by a great empire, not by a mighty fleet, but by a handful of humans and a race who had never known war. The words carried from world to world. They asked for reinforcements. What they got were Deathworlders, and in every corner of the galaxy, oppressed peoples lifted their heads. If the Valari could fight, if the humans could win, then perhaps they too could resist. The legacy of the Deathworlders had begun. Closing scene on Valari Prime. Corporal Reyes stood with Tiralan, looking up at the stars where the battle had been fought. "Do you think anyone will believe it?" Tiralan asked quietly. Reyes smiled faintly. "They'll believe. And if they don't, we'll make them. That's what humans do. We keep fighting until the universe has no choice but to listen. Tyrellin nodded. He no longer looked like a frightened engineer. His eyes burned with the same fire he had seen in the humans. Together they watched the stars, knowing that their world was no longer the same. Because once they had called for help. And what they got were Deathworlders,